Well, hi, Emily. Thank you so much for coming on the Moms Overcoming Overwhelm podcast. I am super psyched to talk to you today.
Emily, I can't wait to talk to you as well. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, I was just saying before we hit record, we have been in different collaborations together. I've kind of known about you for a while. I am a self-proclaimed habits geek, and I was like, why have I not talked to Emily Nichols before? So I'm just super thrilled. We got Emily Squared coming at you today, but I think that our voices are different enough that you know who is who. So it would be great if you could introduce yourself and tell us about you and your family, kind of how you serve moms, and then what you like to do for fun if you ever have any free time to do stuff for fun.
Totally. Well, again, thanks for having me on, Emily. I live in the Midwest in Indiana with my husband. We are high school sweethearts. We've been
Oh,
married over 20 years and we have two boys and two dogs. So our house is chaotic. My boys are 16 and almost 13. So I'm in the midst of like raising teenagers. And we were talking about this as well. I've told my boys plenty of times, like, look, dudes, I don't know what I'm doing. I've never been the mom of a teenager before. So I find myself in this whole new season of life. And it's been really beautiful. It's been challenging too, for sure. But I think back to when I started into what I do now. I'm the host of the podcast Habit Hack Your Health, and I'm a habit and fitness coach. And I really started my journey trying to take care of my own health and my husband along the same route as well. And that turned into becoming a fitness professional, but also digging super deep into habit strategy. I was finding for myself as I was, digging deep into my own food freedom and moving my body more, it just came easier for my husband. It
yeah.
just was so much easier for him to be like, babe, I'm going to go for a run afterward. Do I need to pick up the boys from daycare? Like, and I'm like, no, I got it. And I was getting up at 5 a.m. and doing workouts in my living room because I was like, this is the
Mm.
only time I have to do this. And I got to help them get ready for school and do all the things and get to work. And that's when I started leaning more into habit strategy. I was listening to a lot of personal development and became a behavior change specialist in the midst of that because as I started being a fitness instructor, I noticed other moms had the same problem, right? They're like, I know I want to work out. I know I feel better when I do it. I know I want to eat healthy and still be able to like have cookies too. And I know I need to talk nicer to myself, but I'm just not doing it. So that's when I started digging deeper into habit strategy for myself, but also launching the podcast, launching habit and fitness coaching. We just came out with our own app called the Training for Life app, which is a habit-based fitness app as well. And it's just been really cool to watch it come full circle. And this started way back in 2015 with my husband and I on our own journey together. And it's now been a really great way for us to serve other moms and dads, him as well. And watch it as our kids have gotten older and watching them adopt some of these habits that they watched us adopt when they were little too. So, but yeah, that's pretty much what I do. I serve midlife moms that want to train for life and you do
Mhm.
that via habit strategy. No dieting, no following like a strict plan, but focusing on longevity and being able to do the things you love and with the people you love as well. And then as far as like what I like to do for fun, I love hiking, especially rucking. I always have a ruck on because ladies, we got to help our bone density. That's part of training for life. And we love to paddleboard as well. I'm in Indiana, so you're like, where are you paddleboarding? We have a lot of really great parks. It's getting to be winter, so we're not going to be doing that
Okay.
quite as much. But anything active outside with my kids or sometimes just by myself, I always like to, like I say, go have a little chat with God and go walk in the woods. For me,
Mm.
it's just like something that just lights up my soul. And I have a lot of fun doing it too, and bringing our dogs with us along the way too.
Oh, I love that so much. I sometimes wish that I was a little bit more outdoorsy. We're not super outdoorsy, but I will say, like, even just going on a walk for myself or like with my
Mhm.
kids and everything, that has been a game changer just for my mental, emotional health. And so that is really cool. I'm always very jealous. Like, I have a friend, my best friend, she's going to be hiking Kilimanjaro.
Oh my
You know?
gosh.
So you have
That's
her, and then
cool.
you have me that's like, I think I'll go for a walk in my neighborhood.
Hey, you gotta
So
meet yourself where you're at. You know your strength.
exactly,
Yes.
totally. And I love your mission, like as far as the habit hacking. And then it's not so much the legalistic, like you can't eat this or you have to do this. It's just more the behavioral change aspect because I feel like in no matter what we want to change in our life is just understanding like how can I do this when I really sometimes don't want to do it, which is like applicable for decluttering and for health and so many other things. But since our podcast is called Moms Overcoming Overwhelm, I would be very curious to find out if there is a recent or not so recent season in your motherhood where you were feeling completely overwhelmed. And it could be about anything. It could be stuff, it could be routines, it could be habits, and just kind of bringing us back there and sort of when did you raise that white flag of surrender and what did you do to change things? Because I always love finding out more about like how moms are able to overcome these different seasons of overwhelm because sometimes we don't know that they're coming and then all of a sudden we're like, ah, this was working and now it's not working anymore. So could you
Mhm.
give us an example of that, please?
Yeah, the most recent that comes to mind is probably last spring. So my oldest son is 16. He drives now, which is weird and like so rude of him to be 16. But it's freed up a little bit of time because
Mhm.
he's driving himself around. But in the spring, both of our boys were playing spring sports. This was before my oldest could drive. And he's a very social kid. He plays guitar at our church. And so he's busy on Sunday serving. So we're running him back and forth, back and forth. He golfs. And so he has a lot of practices and take him back and forth to meets. And my youngest was playing lacrosse at the time. So we're going back and forth, back and forth. I'm like coming and going. I don't know where I'm going. And I'm just feeling wore out. Like my
Mhm.
car is exploding with like wrappers from different
Yes.
snacks that I've been eating, they've been eating, dirty cleats, like
Mhm.
golf clubs, and just everything was just spilling over. And then I found like it was like almost spilling over into my home as well because we're coming and going. I'm trying to get something prepared in advance for dinner, like in the slow cooker, but then like
Mhm.
we got to do the dishes. My husband's always like the dishes guy. I'm like, I'll make the dinner, you clean up the dishes, and the boys are great at helping with that too. But I could feel it all piling up. And for me, movement is such a form of like grounding myself when it's feeling chaotic. And I was not moving my body because I'm like, I'm tired. I'm like, my brain is just all the time, like coming and going. Where am I supposed to be? And I could feel almost like it's almost like a pot boiling over, right? And the lid's on it and it's going up, up, up. And finally it just overflowed. And I was like, I need to figure it out. So what I did is I turned to like Hello Fresh meals where I was like,
Mhm.
okay, I don't have to think about making dinner. The boys are old enough where they can help make dinner too if they're home in the evenings and they love doing it as well. That gave me a little less decision fatigue as far as like, okay, what's for dinner? Do I need to get it all from the grocery store to plan it out? Like, what's their schedule for the week? But also, I slowed down and just walked every day. I was like, I'm not holding myself to like a higher standard right now where I have to do like hour long, like strength training sessions. I'm like, this is just a season. It's literally like a month, but I had to kind of step back, kind of like what you said, Emily, like things were working until they weren't, and you
Yeah.
found yourself in a season. And I think that's what happens to a lot of us is we get to that boiling point and it boils over, and you're like, okay, we need to learn to take, I mean, for me, I took a step back and was like, I need to give myself some grace and like just go for a walk every day. Cause like for me, like I said, that's very grounding for me, it finds a lot that helped me to find a lot of peace in a chaotic season, but also know that that season was not going to be forever. And so
Yeah.
after that season was over, I picked back up to my normal routines and that was okay. And I think kind of where we fall short, it's kind of like all or nothing for us
Yes.
sometimes where we're like, well, if I can't do it all, I'm going to do nothing. And then that
Mhm.
just becomes a habit in itself, right? And it
Yeah.
spills over and you can just feel it manifesting physically in your home, in your car, and in your body. But if you kind of just give yourself a little forgiveness, you're like, oh, well, I'm going to do some HelloFresh meals. I'm going to go for walks every day. this feels a little bit better. So that's what
Yeah.
I personally had to do in that season. But yeah, like you said, you don't know you're in it till you're like in it sometimes.
And I love how you were talking about the all or nothing mentality because I feel like I don't understand why, but anytime I've had that boiling over, then we're just so fed up, you know? And so then we're like, I'm gonna go and I'm gonna change everything, and this is not how it's gonna be anymore. And unfortunately, what that causes is for us, like you said, to be holding ourselves to these unrealistic standards because we're kind of in this season of chaos or overwhelm, or our capacity is not what it normally is, and just being able to have that grace. And I feel like this concept of atomic habits, or like sort of the starting small and all of what you teach,
Mhm.
that's so important, because then it isn't like, okay, I haven't moved my body in 2 months, I'm going to train for a marathon. Then it's like, no, we're just going to go on a walk every day. So can you tell us a little bit, like when we're in this season of chaos and overwhelm, which a lot of my listeners are, what, how can atomic habits, like, first of all, what are they? And then how can that help us get out of this kind of chaotic, overwhelmed season and then move in a sustainable and grace-filled way, to whatever is next, our next season, I guess.
Yeah. Atomic literally means like microscopic, but it can make a
Mhm.
big boom. It can make a big impact, is essentially what atomic habits are. I'm sure everyone's read Atomic Habits by James Clear. Like it's on my favorite book pile I have behind my desk as well because I reference it so much. But Atomic Habits is something tiny you can do that can make a big impact. But I like to take it a step further and think about it a little bit deeper and think, well, what about atomic habits for women?
Mm.
Right? It's one thing to read like Atomic Habits and be like, okay, well, just do a cue routine reward, create a habit loop, and do the thing. And it's like, okay, great. All right, I have this habit loop going. I'm working out every day, or I'm doing my devotional every day. Oh my gosh, my kid got sick and I am not able to do the thing I wanted to do. Or whoops, I have to run cross country shoes up to my kid because they forgot this. Or oh, I forgot I had this meeting on my calendar, and things get thrown off our schedules sometimes, right? So as women, we have to just think about it differently, where we have to be able to create some habits that serve us and our identity first and foremost. Like, who are you at your core? Like, I come from the realm of health. So if I'm like, I'm supposed to like diet because that's what diet culture has told me to do, and because I want to be skinny, I'm probably not going to stick to a diet because that's not realistic. That's not who I
Yeah.
am at my core. But if I'm like, I love to eat healthy and without restriction because it gives me more energy. It helps me feel more clear and calm throughout the day. I'm more than likely to stick to that habit as well. You can even do that with decluttering, right? You can
Mhm.
even create your own habit identity to be like, I don't need extra stuff. My identity's in Christ. I
Mhm.
have enough with my loving family here at home. I don't need to keep adding more to my plate on my calendar and in my digital clutter and all the things. And you can create habits to reinforce who you are. So I think at our core as women, we need to first start with our habit identity and get deeper, get really, really deep into who you are and how your habits can support that. Then you can create some habit strategies. But I think what we sometimes do is kind of like what you alluded to, Emily. We're like, well, I'm going to do it all. I'm going to
Mhm.
declutter. I'm going to work out. I'm going to like do like my devotional. I'm going to like spend time one on one with my kids every day. Like, that's amazing. We have the best of intentions, but that's
Yeah.
not real life. That's not real life.
Yeah.
Things are going to happen. So that's what I like to think of as atomic habits. It's something that can make a big impact
Mhm.
on who you are, but also the people around you as well, because we're such nurturing beings by nature. If you kind of step into it, think like, how can this impact other people? It can make a big difference, but it doesn't have to be everything. It can be one tiny little thing that can really help support your habit identity. And once that's feeling like an unconscious habit, then you can add a little bit
Yeah.
more.
I really appreciate how you are understanding the nuance for women and atomic habits for women. Something that I just kind of realized is that in the habit space, you have James Clear, you have Charles Duhigg and you have BJ Fogg. And have you
Mhm.
noticed that those are all men?
Mhm.
And so you have a lot of men that are telling us like what habits should and shouldn't be. I
Mhm.
just finished reading The Plan. I know you and I were talking about Kendra Dachi. She just did this book about productivity and planning, but talking about how most of the productivity literature has been from a male perspective. And also, a lot of the habits literature has been from a male perspective. So when we think about our energy levels that are cyclical on a 28-day cycle versus a man that's a 24-hour cycle, we have to be able to create habits that work for us as women on a 28-day cycle. Not that it has to all be about your menstrual cycle, but that's just an example of like being able to shift it for women. So understanding that and some of the other nuances with like our energy, with having things interrupted, with things getting off track. So how can we start to, make some of those shifts with the understanding that we're taking this really cool approach about doing it from a woman's perspective, and also like you said, that habit identity and being able to look, because just one other thing, I will let you talk, I promise. I get so excited.
Let's talk. Let's go. Let's go in.
Yeah, but just like we have so many roles, so we have mom, wife, whatever, our jobs, like all of these things. And so sometimes it's hard for us to actually think about, like, well, who am I actually? Like, what is my habit identity? Because it can be impacted so much by our roles. And so I would
Mhm.
just love
Mhm.
anything that you have to say about any of that. I just threw a lot at you.
Well, and it's so true, right? One of my podcasting friends, Anna Dearman Cornick. Have you had her on your show?
Mm-mm.
Okay, she hosts It's About Time. You would love
Oh
her.
yeah. Oh yeah.
Okay. She had mentioned to me a long time ago. She was like, most of like the personal development books or habit books, she was like, it's all written from the male perspective. And there's so many
Mhm.
different things to incorporate with women because we think about things differently, not just like with our cycle, like you
Yeah.
mentioned, like, oh my gosh, that could be like a whole episode
Mhm.
in itself, but also the way we process things, right? Like I said, I have teenagers right now. So it's not as physically exhausting, but it can be emotionally exhausting. So if I get up and my teenagers are just like grumpy and I'm like, oh my gosh, are you okay? Like, is something bothering you? And then I'll keep that on my heart and head all day. Where my husband's just like, they're fine. They said they were fine. I'm like, well, I don't know. I'm gonna double check and like you're constantly thinking about things. Not to say that my husband doesn't care, like
Yeah.
he cares deeply. But you know what I mean? We just
Mhm.
think about things differently and we hold on to it. Or if you're sitting here on a Zoom call in the back of my head, I'm like, there's a bunch of dishes in the sink I still have to do that I haven't done, right? Whereas my husband's like, we'll just get the dishes done when we get them done, right? We just think about it differently. So this is such a great point, Emily. It's just a matter of like, it's not our fault. Maybe your habits haven't stuck for you in whatever season of life you're in, whatever habit. We just have to think about it differently and do it a little bit more tiny, do it a little bit more strategically in order to make it stick. That way, then you lose a decision fatigue and you're just doing it.
Yeah. And if there are any, as far as like the return on investment, because you're talking about like the atomic habits that they're very small, but then they have like the big boom, which I love that idea.
Mhm.
But are there any things like for women that are in this survival mode that you would recommend from a health perspective, maybe like some of these tiny atomic habits that would have that huge return on investment, as far as like women are always like in my group, oh, I don't have the time, or I'm not motivated, or I don't have the
Yeah.
energy. So what are a couple, I guess, examples of some of those like keystone atomic habits that you would recommend?
Yeah, yeah. So movement, exercise, fitness, whatever you want to call it, gives you energy, right? It also produces happy hormones. It makes you feel good, helps you feel more productive, but we're tired. We're like, I don't want to work out. I don't have
Mhm.
the time to work out, right? But we need energy. So we do something really silly in our community, but it really gets you thinking about atomic habits and creating some habit loops, like you said, a keystone habit that will inspire other healthy habits in your life. And that is something called P squats. Okay. So hear me out. So every time you go to the bathroom, you wash your hands. you do 10 squats. So the cue is I got to go to the bathroom. The routine is do 10 squats. The reward on the other side is, wow, I just did 10 squats. If I was to, and say you go to the bathroom 10 times throughout the day, 100 squats. Now, if I was to ask you right now, okay, Emily, let's stand up. Let's do 100 squats right now. You'd be like, no thanks. My quads are gonna burn out, my glutes are on fire, like my forearms are, I'll get too tired and don't want to do it.
Yeah.
It's the same thing when we're trying to do it all at once, right? If we keep it super small like that, wow, I just did 100 squats throughout the day. My booty's lifted. I'm feeling confident. I moved my body. I'm feeling more productive throughout the day. You're leaning into that reward cycle as far as like celebrating that you did it. Maybe the next day you're like, maybe I'll pop in like find like a 20-minute YouTube yoga flow
Yeah.
or like a core workout to do. You feel a little more inspired. You're rewiring like the neurotransmitters in your brain to be like, I feel good when I do this. And this was easy. We made it small. It's atomic, but boom, it's creating such a big impact in so many other areas of your life and influencing that, right? And then it just snowballs from
Mhm.
there where you're like, well, I want to eat healthier. Another thing women struggle with is like meal prep and like the overwhelm of all of that. And so I'm like, keep it simple. Just focus on the ingredients. Or we do a habit hack where anytime you're in the kitchen creating a meal, you always make extra protein.
Mhm.
I'll make lunch later today and I'm going to plan on throwing some chicken thighs in the oven while I make my lunch, just so I have that later to create something for dinner and to create something for lunch tomorrow. That way, I wasn't creating like a 10-step recipe. It was literally like, I'm going to cook some chicken thighs and I'll be able to add stuff to it later. So it's making it so much smaller like that and seeing how that has a bigger impact in so many other areas of your life. It could also be like a nightly reset, right?
Mhm.
You do your dishes, you clean up after dinner, nightly reset. We're going to go in and just like fold up all the blankets in the living room because my kids all love to cuddle up in blankets still. We're going to reset all the dog toys that the dogs got out. Okay, dishes are done, kitchen's shut down. We're good to go for the rest of the day. It doesn't have to be big, but all of
Mhm.
that just makes you feel good, especially if you really lean into that reward part of it. Like I said, you're changing your neurotransmitters where you're like, this feels good. I want to keep doing it.
Oh, those are so helpful. And I think also just knowing that if you say, okay, I'm just going to do, the 10 squats or whatever, then if you have the time and interest to do more, then you can. But it's just being able to say, like, okay, I'm going to have this doable habit. And then if for some reason I feel like I can do a little bit more, then great. And then you're kind of showing yourself, like, oh, and it's reinforcing your identity too, right? So if you're
Mm-hmm.
saying like, oh, well, bone density and my strength, like that's really important to me, then you're kind of proving it to yourself by being able to do these kind of daily things. And so you've given me a lot of great ideas. I'm already like, where can I incorporate some of these things in my day and take advantage of those habit loops? Or is there anything else that you would like to share before we figure out or find out how to connect with you?
No, just kind of like I mentioned earlier, Emily, like just everyone give yourself some grace.
Mhm.
Know that it's not your fault. Like I said, if your habits haven't been sticking, we just need to think about them differently. And once it starts sticking, once it starts clicking for you, it'll eventually be like when you were working with your kids when they were really little to potty train them,
Mhm.
right? You have to use some strategy. You get like a sticker chart. They have their own habit loop, like, oh, I gotta go potty, and you get like a sticker chart, and they get a big prize at the end. Like one of my
Mhm.
kids got like a Buzz Lightyear when they filled up their sticker chart. We don't do that anymore, right?
Right.
They consciously do that. So sometimes we have to keep it to the basics with some habit strategy, keep it small, and then eventually you don't have to think about it anymore. You are just unconsciously
Yeah.
moving your body, taking care of your health, talking nicer to yourself, doing these little declutters throughout your home where it doesn't feel like a big lift. It's just part of who you are
Mhm. Oh, that's so helpful. Well, thank you so much, Emily, for coming on the show and, like I said, geeking out with me about all things
all
habits.
day long, anytime.
Yeah, yeah. And what is the best way for everybody to connect with you if they want to learn more?
Yeah, well, come listen to Habit Hack Your Health wherever you're listening. While you're on the iTunes app, make sure to go leave a written review for Emily's podcast. So if you're listening right now, then you can come over if you like my show, listen and leave a review as well. That helps more eyeballs and ears get on each other's shows as well. But you go listen there. I have a lot of freebies linked in there and other ways that we can work together. But I am just so rooting for everyone that's listening
Yay.
today.
Yay. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your wisdom. The wisdom is really great talking with you today.
Thanks, Emily. You too.